was trying to intentionally block my view from the camera, and then I better sneak it down a little bit.
Come on. Everybody wants to see you.
Yeah, right. So
Well.
I know we were going to talk about a specific thing this week, but I am elated about what happened today.
I am too. And I'm sure Marissa is as well. She's really big on the case, knows everything about it. She's going to help us out with details.
Marissa, do you follow the Karen Reed case?
Not as closely as you guys did.
Karen Reed, not guilty.
Not guilty.
Hallelujah.
Yes.
Today is a good day.
It is a good day.
Yeah.
And we have opinions.
Yes, we do.
And perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, here we are.
Yeah. So I got to be honest, I'm in my own little world, and I think everybody is following this Karen Reed case. Everybody knows about it. None of my friends know about it. None of my friends know who I'm talking about. I'm like, what? I bring it up at work. Pfft, no clue. They look at me like I have 3 eyeballs. I'm so disappointed in my friends.
And you don't have 3 eyeballs.
Well, geez. So evidently, I get trapped and fall into this little world where I'm just obsessed with something. I get obsessive over it. But it was all over my For You page on TikTok. How could you not follow the trial?
I bet obviously it's going to be way more popular out east.
Sure.
And I don't even know what people follow out here. Everybody has. They probably follow like derby cars and monster trucks. I don't know. What do people in the Midwest follow?
You fall into your own little niche, and then, yeah, everybody's different. But a lot of volleyball followers, I know, a lot of sports following.
Well, and it's not like it was all over
crime.
Fox
Yeah.
News.
And that's where I originally saw the case was on a blip on the news, and I'm like, oh, okay, and just sort of paid attention to it. And then I really, truly think I had some videos on my page on TikTok, and then just kind of piqued my interest. And why it piqued my interest is because there seemed to be this underlying statement of police corruption. And I think that's really, when there's this portrayed bad guy, as in Karen Reed, and then you have this group of people that are conspiring against her, and then you realize something doesn't smell right. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. She's really not the bad guy. They're the bad guys. It's just very interesting, and I was completely enthralled with it. So.
And now here we are, the jury dropouts.
Yes, so officially we are off jury duty today as of like 3 o'clock.
Yes.
You can now freely speak about the case.
Yes.
I'll freely talk about it.
Well, I'm Mike.
I'm Jamie.
I'm Marissa.
And Marissa is behind the computer. She's going to feed us any details that we don't know or we don't remember. And I'm sure there'll be a few. And we're talking Karen Reed.
Mm-hmm.
And the not guilty verdict. Well, guilty on one charge.
Yes, she was guilty on one charge.
But not guilty on the major charges. The guilty verdict was on the OUI, or as out here we call it DUI, operating under the influence or driving under the influence, which she was sentenced to 1 year probation, and I believe she has to take some classes.
Yeah, in the headline it said facing 1 year probation. So does that mean it's actually a done deal, or will they adjust that?
No. What I watched today when I watched a rerun, because I was busy working, I saw the judge they did the sentence, and she issued the 1 year probation, and then the court reporter or whatever repeated it, and so that's a done deal. And
Okay.
the other thing brought up that I'm not real familiar with, and maybe somebody else is, but they talked about sealed records. So she has 10 days to request that the court documents or that the verdict is not sealed or it's automatically sealed. And once it's sealed, I don't think that she can go back. And this is my understanding, and I could be way wrong here, but then she can't go back and get some sort of information about the verdict, whatever that means. But I don't even know if it's important at this point. I mean, I don't know.
I suppose it would have been important if it was like the first trial and there was that confusion and it was a mistrial because it was hung jury, maybe? Excuse me?
Oh, somebody's ringing. Very important. Uh-oh. The school?
Yeah. I wonder if it's about a baseball game. Who knows? I don't know. Who knows? Anyway.
Maybe. Are you late?
For class?
For class? For school?
I don't know. I thought you graduated.
I guess it's debatable.
But anyway, so I think what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the case, the details.
Yeah, because, I had somebody, okay, so of course, I see Fox News, it comes up on my Facebook and it's live and breaking news, found not guilty on murder, yada, yada. And I reposted it and put, heck yeah, something like that, not guilty or something like that. And I had a friend actually say, really? ? Well, who do you think did it then? And I thought, oh my gosh, there is doubt. There is doubt by people. And so I just want to, and then of course, I just want to vomit all of this information. How could you think she's guilty with this, and this? And I think maybe let's go over some of that, of why I fully believe she was framed and I fully believe she was completely innocent. That people may not know because they didn't necessarily follow the case as closely as we did.
And I think I don't know if this is going to shock some people, but as an ex-law enforcement officer, I'm not, people think that maybe that cops blindly follow other cops.
Right.
And there might be departments where that's true. I am not one of those. So I actually felt that she was not guilty pretty early in the case. So I can tell you, the first time I heard about this case, maybe it's the first time you heard about it as well, is I think it was on like a Fox News. It was a national news. It certainly wasn't local out here. But when I first saw it, I thought, wow, some chick backed over her boyfriend who was a cop.
Yep.
And I initially thought, they're drunk, which I think was the initial reports. However, I didn't watch the first court case, but I did watch the second one. And all it took for me to really, I guess, maybe give this case a side eye to the law enforcement side is when I heard that law enforcement destroyed phones, their own phones.
Right.
And I thought, what the fuck?
There was a lot of shady activity.
Well, and this might sound maybe some bias, but at that point, I just based on that alone automatically thought, okay, she probably didn't do this, because the only people that destroy phones are people that are hiding something. And when they hide something, I automatically think guilt. I mean, why else?
Exactly.
So let's talk about...
And not just destroy phones, but destroy the SIM card.
Did you just
I
destroy your phone?
just
She
destroyed
destroyed your phone.
Was that your phone?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But
you didn't murder somebody on the way here, did you?
I don't think I hit anybody with my car. Who takes out the SIM card, breaks the SIM card? And I'm getting ahead of it. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but that's what they did. Took out the SIM card, broke the SIM card, and then just took the SIM card to an off location. In fact, it was like an Air Force base or something, and threw the phone away, threw the SIM card in a separate place. Like, what?
Yeah, who does that?
Who does that?
And I could be mistaken on this, but I'm pretty sure the excuse was they were due for a new phone, an upgrade.
Yeah.
Now, I'm probably weird, but I have still in my house every phone I think I've ever had.
I could. I don't know if I do, but I probably could. A little red razor flip phone. It probably had some grainy picture that I just thought I still had to have. But
Well,
anyway.
So yeah, I heard that, and automatically, and this isn't the way you should investigate a case, but I can tell you, if I was investigating any sort of a case and somebody involved in the case, and it could be a witness, it could be a suspect, it could be an associate, if all of a sudden somebody destroys their phone, I mean, I'm immediately thinking, what the hell was on that phone?
Right.
And you know, it could be that there was something else on the phone that's related to either another crime or another incident that they didn't want to go public. However, it still looks really bad. So that's initially what made me think, okay.
And I'm not tech savvy, but what all saves to the cloud?
Well, I don't think that
Like,
your text messages
your text?
will save to a cloud.
Yeah, I think it's only pictures.
Just pictures?
Pictures, documents.
And that's only if they're shared to the cloud, right?
Sure. Well,
Oh, I guess assuming isn't the cloud only connected to iPhone, Apple?
No.
No.
So
Okay.
So Verizon has their own cloud. Samsung has their own cloud. Almost everything anymore, tech-wise, is coming out with a cloud. But and I suppose the reason they do that, because your contacts are on the cloud, is so if your phone were to be lost or destroyed, that when you get your new phone, you can download your contacts, some of your old pictures, documents, anything you wanted to save to the new phone. However, I don't believe that text messages are saved.
I don't know.
So, at least I've never seen them. You know, I've gone through my cloud and looked for old pictures like, oh man, I forgot I even had that. And then I'll re-download it to my phone. Maybe it was a picture that I either had deleted because I didn't think I needed, then I find it later on. You know, just old stuff. But the only thing I've ever noticed were there's a document folder. There's a folder that has the pictures and videos, contacts. But I don't think I've ever seen like saved phone calls. I've never really seen saved text messages. But
Careful when you put your arm down.
yeah, I did notice. I'll have to edit some of this out. But it didn't stop there though. So what else did you notice, or what's something that you listened to or watched on the case, and you're like,
Oh
what the
gosh,
fuck?
where do I start?
Well, we got to start somewhere. So we've talked about the phones. That's at least that was my initial kind of what the fuck's going on here. But
I think another piece that raised an eyebrow was the dog. So we're talking about Karen Reed, but we're not talking about who was actually murdered, and that was John O'Keefe, which was her boyfriend, who was a Boston police officer. So the other people involved in this situation were also Boston police officers, Canton police officers, and they were at their house that night, and the Alberts family had a German Shepherd dog. And mysteriously, the dog just disappears after that night. And this is after he's clearly got proven what was proven by the medical examiners is that, and by experts, is that he's got dog bites on his arm. And you just kind of have to wonder, Why did they get rid of this dog?
See, and that's actually the next piece that made me even more convinced that she didn't do it. And it wasn't just the dog bites. Of course, I'm looking at the pictures of the arm. They appeared to be bites of some sort. And of course, then they brought up the dog, and I was like, well, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with canines. And I've seen dog bites, and yeah, they do look like dog bites. But besides that, she hit him with a car, supposedly. At least that's what they were saying. And what I didn't see was no broken bones,
Mm-hmm.
no reported bruising. So the injuries, at least from my experience, also were not consistent with being hit by a car.
Yeah, and I think people who, like a layperson who might not know, and I have to admit, I don't necessarily know. I'm a nurse, but I'm not necessarily savvy in what exact injuries I'm going to see with a car strike. Yes, in common, when you think about it, okay, obviously, yeah, you're going to have broken bones, but what his injuries were was a fractured skull. Basically, is what his cause of death was his fractured skull, and then he had, I don't know.
We had a cut on his eye.
Yeah, I was gonna say he had a laceration on his eye and his nose. They called them raccoon eyes, which the medical experts later described as coup contre coup type bruising. But initially, I mean, it looked like he got punched in the face.
And I can tell you, coup contre coup injuries, for anybody that's not familiar with that, is actually how the brain bounces around in the head when it contacts something. Mm-hmm. So if you slam your head on the ground, there's going to be damage to the back of your brain, but there's also like a recoil. So your brain bounces forward, and now there's damage on the front side of your brain. And that would cause the raccoon eyes.
Yeah, you see that a lot in shaken baby syndrome.
So, and I'm not sure with a direct punch to the head. When I was in the training center, I was thinking that we discussed that, and I think that was a possibility, that if you were punched real hard right in the face, that you're going to have that jarring back, which your brain's going to come forward. It's going to slam into basically the front of your face. And then as your head whips back and kind of stops, because your head can only whip back so far before your neck stops it, then your brain's going to continue traveling, and now it's going to slam into the back of your head. So you've got damage to both the front side of the brain and the back side of the brain. But just looking at the injuries themselves, if you think about a car backing into a person, and supposedly it only hit maybe his arm.
Well, that's where it didn't make sense, because he's got these injuries all over his arm, and he's got these injuries he's got a fractured skull. So initially when I heard about it, I think, oh, she hit him with the car and she hit him in the head, and that's what fractured his skull. But then that doesn't explain why he's got all these injuries up and down his arm. And I think that's where the prosecution, they completely tried to portray the story that she backed into his arm, and he hit these wounds from the broken taillight, and it just completely made no sense.
Well, no, and I'm looking at the picture of his arm right now, and it looks like the injuries start maybe halfway up his bicep, maybe a little bit higher, but halfway up the bicep. So you see what looks like tears or scrapes. Of course, we don't know how deep these are. It's just a picture, and then just about right at the elbow, above the elbow, there's two more. And then just below the elbow, there's several. And they go not quite to his wrist. So if you consider how big that area is, and he was supposedly backed into with the vehicle and it broke the taillight out. Well, what broke the taillight out? Was it his arm? Was it his head? Was it his face? And the injuries, at least looking at his arm, the area that takes was, I mean, it looks like it's bigger than the taillight unless his arm was bent. But then once again, that doesn't explain the injuries to his head and face.
Right.
But would the taillight be that
Well, this
high
is
up? Like that's
Well,
so. Let's talk about what they're saying happened, just so anybody not familiar with it, and nobody's probably going to see the title of this podcast and look at it without kind of knowing some backstory. But just in case, so supposedly this Karen Reed, John O'Keefe, their boyfriend girlfriend. John, of course, is a member of the. Is it the Boston or the Canton Police Department? Is Canton like a suburb
Canton.
of Boston?
he was a
Well-
Boston police officer.
Okay. So, anyways, the night kind of started out. They're all at the bar, and they're with other police officers from either his department, neighboring department, and then I think even an FBI agent, or not an FBI, ATF agent, which is Brian Higgins. So they're hanging out at the bar, and apparently they're going to continue this party over at another police officer's house who's there at the bar with him, and that is
Brian Albert.
Brian Albert. So they get in their vehicles, they head over to the house, and John O'Keefe rides with his girlfriend, which is Karen Reed, over to the house. Now, supposedly, according to the police, John gets out of the car. They've been arguing, supposedly, had some sort of a disagreement. And did she supposedly start pulling away, and then she backed up at 20-some miles an hour and hit him and knocked him into the yard, where he was later found dead. The defense alleged, now is proven, at least according to what the jury found, is that she actually dropped him off. He went into the house. Something happened in the house, an altercation. That's where the dog that they believe caused the injuries to the arm happened during the altercation, which would make sense. And he was either killed in the house or severely injured in the house, ended up outside in the front yard, whether he walked out there himself or he was carried out there and left. So that's kind of the brief.
The synopsis. Yep.
Yes.
The Cliff Notes.
But nothing, I didn't see anything that made me back up and rethink, well, maybe she did.
No.
It's a very low helicopter.
That's a very low helicopter. So everything that I saw seemed to indicate that there was some shady shit going on. How the whole thing was investigated.
You mean non-investigated?
Non-investigated. I mean, the whole thing was just it was a circus. And so one of the things that, besides the injuries and the other shady shit, was even the investigator on how he conducted himself in the text messages that he sent, where he referred to her as did he say she was hot, but she had no ass?
Right. Yeah.
And that she was a crazy bitch.
she was psycho and
He referred to her as a whack job cunt.
yep.
She's fucked, and zero chance she skates.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, I think, so far as an investigator goes, now he's completely biased. So he's only looking in one direction.
Yeah, and this was like right after this accident. I mean, it was the day, that was the day they found him. He was already sending these texts to his buddies
So
because they were asking about, okay, what's going on? what's the story? Give us a scoop. And he's like, yeah, the girl's fucked. You know, pin it on the girl, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of his buddies says, well, is the homeowner gonna get in trouble for it? And he's like, nah, he's a Boston cop.
So just
right
saying
off the
that,
bat, yeah.
Yeah, he's a Boston cop. He ain't going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
So now you know that he's just, no matter what, he is not looking that direction. He just ain't going to do it.
No.
So there's only one route left for him to go. He's got to prove that she did it. So let's talk about when the cops even show up. So he doesn't show up home. Karen goes and picks up a friend, which was, who'd she pick up?
Well, okay. So she makes a phone call first. Let's back up a little bit and kind of get to where she's leaving from. So basically what happens is, the backstory is that her and John have this kind of a sketchy relationship now. They're not really on the up and up. They're kind of deciding whether they want to continue this relationship or not. She's feeling very used from what she expresses, and I think he probably liked to have her around when he wanted to have her around, and that was probably about it. It made her mad. I think she probably wasn't getting what she wanted out of the relationship. So basically, when she drops him off, she doesn't go inside because she doesn't really feel welcome. She's not real good friends with these people, and he goes inside to try to sniff things out to see if they're welcome or not. Well, he doesn't come back. And so it pissed her off. And she immediately tries calling him and saying, like, okay, hey, what's up? Like, are we welcome? Am I coming in? And he doesn't answer. He ignores her. So right off the bat, it triggers her. Like, he's ignoring my phone calls. And probably the reason it triggers her is because that whole day they were texting back and forth and having this text argument. And he pretty much said, I can't talk right now. Leave me alone. This was earlier in the afternoon. And she's kind of acting a little bit neurotic and is doing this constant calling. And she calls him back to back to back to back to back to back. And he's ignoring her phone calls throughout the afternoon. And so when this happens later on in the night, and he did the same thing, she calls him on the phone to say, hey, are we welcome? And he ignores her call. I think it triggered her. And so she was like, F this. F you, buddy. I'm leaving. And so she left. She left and she goes back to his house. As she's leaving and going back to his house, she is leaving the most scathing voice messages on his phone, calling him names and saying, you're a pervert, and I can't believe you're doing this to me. You're such an asshole. I hate you. I'm just going off on him. And so I think that's where the police said, oh, well, that's why they're fighting, and she hates him, and that's why she killed him. That was, that was the motive right there. In actuality, I'm like, nah, that sounds like a woman who's just completely pissed off and blowing up his phone and wants him to answer and just basically voicing how pissed off she is. Like, I didn't find that. I found that to be a little bit normal within the relationship. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that? Did you hear the voice messages?
I didn't.
Oh, they're normal.
I was gonna say
I've had phone calls like that before, not from Marissa, but from previous relationships, definitely.
If you don't have a relationship where there's good communication, that's what you're gonna get. You're gonna get this toxicity, and she was triggered, and so then she called him like 50 times, I think, and was leaving all these scathing messages on his phone. Anyway, so
Had she been drinking as well?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they were all drinking.
So
And that's another factor.
throw in alcohol.
That's
and
another factor. You know, you get a little crazy. You know, you get a little psychotic when you're a woman who thinks they're being used and, you know, not paid attention to. So she goes home. She goes back to his house, whatever. She falls asleep. She wakes up around 5 o'clock and notices he's not home. And regardless of how mad they are, he typically comes home. And this is not normal for him because he has custody of his niece and nephew. And so she had left him a voicemail and said, I'm leaving. Like, your niece and nephew are going to be here by themselves. I'm leaving. I'm not staying here. I'm not being your babysitter. And she just said, okay, it's not normal for him to leave the kids and not come home. And so that's when she wakes up her niece and says, I need the phone number for Jim McCabe, because that is who was one of the people that were at the party and that was at the bar with them that night. And so she calls Jen McCabe and says, John didn't come home, yada, yada. So I don't know if Jen said, come over to my house or I'm coming to get you, one of the two. And then after she gets off the phone with Jen, she calls another friend of his named Carrie and says the same thing. And so then the three of them end up together in one of their vehicles. And then that's when they go back to the house and find John.
So they find John in the front yard. And I think he's deceased at that time, I believe, isn't he? Or did they pronounced him dead probably at the hospital, but he's dead in the front yard of the house that they went to that night. Mm-hmm. So ultimately the EMS shows up, law enforcement shows up. What I find odd is you have a dead cop in the front yard of a cop's house. So, do you think that a law enforcement officer would go knock on the door and say, what the fuck is going on in your front yard?
Yeah.
You would think they would.
You would think.
But they don't.
No.
Nope. So, they're trying to process what's left of the scene. Now, I think by this time John O'Keefe is loaded up. He's gone. So they're looking at the blood in the snow, and they're looking for evidence. And naturally, the first thing you do is you find a leaf blower, so you can blow the snow around to find the evidence. Now, I'm not going to say that that was a terrible idea. Now, the only problem I have with using a leaf blower to blow around the snow to find the evidence is if, well, I can tell you, I've worked a case where things had to be sifted through on the ground, and this is no shit. They were on their hands and knees with these little brushes, and they were in Tyvek suits, and they were literally brushing the ground away inch by inch. If you use a fucking leaf blower, if you've got evidence that's light, you just blew it halfway across the fucking town.
Well, okay. So my logic brain kicks in, and I'm thinking, okay, they're find these drops of reddish brown liquid. If they're thinking he got hit by a car, he's got this gaping head wound in his cracked skull. Yeah, there's gonna be freaking blood, don't you think?
Yeah.
I guess my point is, why are you collecting snow in a Solo cup from the neighbor's house? Why are you collecting that blood?
Well, so I'm not so sure at that point, maybe they even knew or thought that maybe there was even a car accident. I can't remember when the supposed car accident came into play. However, I can tell you, and you already brought it up, you also don't collect evidence in fucking Solo cups and trash bags. I mean, I will give you that some evidence bag are paper sacks. But the difference is on that sack, is spots where you can put the date, the time, maybe the collection number if it's piece of evidence number 1. There's going to be the location of where it's picked up. It's typically photographed before it's picked up. I mean, there's a whole process. I've never used a fucking solo cup. I've never used a cup at all.
It's just.
I've used bags.
It's like, is this real life? Do they really think that was a great idea? I don't get it.
So the department I worked for was in a small county with a small county seat, and it was a department of 4 or 5. We had evidence bags in the trunk of every goddamn car. So why are these police officers showing up in cruisers with no evidence collection bags or devices? And I think one of the guys that showed up was like a sergeant or a captain. I think it was at the very least a sergeant.
Yeah.
Why does that guy not have anything? And how many fucking cop cars were there? And nobody had an evidence collection bag. And let's say these are all just the traffic cops. All they have is a ticket book, and their pens. How goddamn far away is the police department where they can't say, hey, so-and-so, you want to run back to the police department? Maybe grab some evidence bags. But no, we go across the street to the neighbor's house. And who's the neighbor? I think it's another cop.
It's like another cop.
Matter of fact, I think it's a supervisor. And he says, hey, let me grab some solo cups out of the stack on my fridge, and here's some
Woolen go bags.
Well, even
some hinky-dinky bags, whatever you...
so Boston PD, so they're a larger agency. So they probably have the PD, probably a CSI of some sort. So do you think that they were waiting for CSI and thought, oh, we better grab this before? And
No, nobody does that. If you're waiting for CSI, you're not touching anything. You might mark something with a flag or with a paint marker. Of course, this is snow, so you're probably not using paint or a flag. But I can tell you, you tape it off, you make sure no one goes in or out, and you wait. And you knock on the fucking door to see if anybody's home and say, hey, did you know there's a dead guy in your front yard? Know anything about that?
Yeah,
Did you
their
hear
excuses
anything?
is it's snowing, there's a blizzard. Well, there is like, there are not even 2 feet of snow on the ground at that point.
Even if there was 2 feet of snow, I'm knocking on doors.
Well, sure.
And I think they did
or
knock
you're
on
going back to the
doors.
department and getting some evidence bags.
Yeah. So that whole thing is stupid. Now, at this point, they don't find any broken taillight. They
Correct.
haven't found no broken taillight yet.
Which makes 0 sense, because if you're using a leaf blower, you think it would be
Yeah,
everywhere.
I don't think we have to explain to anybody that snow is white and
Yeah.
taillights are red.
Yeah.
So,
They found droplets of blood.
but they found clear fucking glass.
Yeah, it just makes 0 sense.
So we found a clear glass that he was supposedly holding, but we found no taillight. But they found the taillight the next day.
Okay, and here's another thing that makes 0 sense. They're claiming that this taillight, he's 7 feet off of the road into the yard. That's where they find the taillights, the taillight pieces. You think that taillight is going to fly with him? No, it's going to drop on the ground where he was supposedly hit.
Yeah.
Makes 0 sense how that taillight ends up 7 feet in the yard.
But his shoe stayed on the ground. Now, I will say that a shoe leaving a foot in a traffic accident, especially with a pedestrian car, that's not unusual. But I will also tell you that every law enforcement there also knew that's not unusual.
Right.
So it wouldn't...
Especially when they brought up the phrase, getting knocked out of your shoes.
Yeah,
They're the ones that brought up that phrase.
and I think they found the shoe that night.
Yeah, I don't remember.
So I will tell you that if I'm working a pedestrian accident and a car smashes into somebody, typically when a car hits somebody, they're going forward. In this case, supposedly it's backwards. But wherever I find the shoe is probably going to be very close to where I find broken pieces of plastic from the car. It's not all going to fly. As a matter of fact, none of it's probably going to fly into the yard. And anybody that's ever gone in reverse, so here's another issue I had. At 20 some miles an hour, like 10 miles an hour is fast. 20 miles an hour in the snow.
There's no way.
And you smoke somebody. And the only thing you leave at the point of collision is the shoe. All the car parts go in the yard.
And no broken bones.
And no broken bones. So
that's why I feel like, gosh, people who really think that she could be guilty just have no clue about any of the evidence. They're not using their common sense.
No, so what else did they at the scene? Was there anything else at the scene itself besides they didn't go into the house? Now, I think that eventually, maybe later the next day, they went and they talked to people in the house, but they didn't go like at that time in the morning. And when I said that the taillight was found the next day, I think it was actually later that same day.
5 p.m.
Yeah.
He was found at 6 a.m. and they supposedly found the first taillight piece at 5 p.m.
Hours later. Like that should have been sticking out. And then they're probably going to say, well, it was covered up by snow. Well, you're out there with a leaf blower.
And at that point, like I said, there was only about 2 feet of snow, or 2 inches, I mean. I did not mean feet. Inches. 2 inches of snow. 2 inches.
Yeah, the whole thing with that scene, I probably would have been scratching my head like, that's weird. So, after they find the taillight, I guess, they do go pick up the car. And
No. They picked up the car before they found the taillight pieces.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's how the taillight pieces got there.
That's right. So, and I think that they base that on, they were saying that she said, they state that she claimed, I hit him. However, there's other witnesses that say that she said no.
Do you think I hit him?
Did I hit him?
Yeah.
So more of a question.
Yeah, because she has no clue what happened to this guy. And she's and I would do the same thing. Your boyfriend's dead and you're thinking, what in the hell happened? And so her brain is going 1,000 miles a minute thinking, what the hell? What's going on? Did I hit him? And just completely like oblivious as to what's happening.
He was found not far from probably where she dropped him off, because I think she dropped him off in front of the house. I don't think she dropped him off in the driveway. At least it's my understanding. Do you remember?
It's just past the mailbox, I believe, is where she dropped him off. That's where she said she dropped him off.
Anyway, so they collect the vehicle. They put it in the Sally port.
Which, back up just a little bit, because at 5 o'clock when she discovers that he's missing and calls the 2 girls and they say, well, let's go look for him, come to my house. She's frantic. She backs up in the driveway and she happens to back up into his car that's in the driveway.
Yep, which they don't. So they don't know this at that time. But in court, they play a Ring video from John's house. And you can see in the Ring video, and they blow it up, that she backed right into it and that tire moved. And it's like, oh, maybe that's how the taillight got broke. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's interesting is when we say the taillight was broke when she backed into the vehicle, there's something else I noticed. She pulls away. There's red lights on both sides of the vehicle. And when they were showing pictures of her vehicle in the Sally port with the broken taillight, the taillight's not even there.
It's completely gone.
It's gone. So where the hell did the red light come from?
Yeah.
And this is when she leaves to go find him. So if she's already backed into him, busted the tail light so bad that it's gone, there's going to be a big, huge, bright white light as she's pulling away. But all you really see is two red lights. Now, I did see some video footage where they really zoomed in, and then you can kind of see some white light. But I do know that if that taillight was gone to the extent that they showed in that Sally port, you wouldn't have had to zoom in.
Right, and they're claiming they found part of the the piece that actually lights up, that makes it lights.
Oh, oh shoot, I know what you're talking about.
God, I'm having a brain fart. But
Well, it's an internal component in the tail light that actually causes the red light to like spread out,
right.
like not a refractor, right?
And it's not.
Something
It's like a
that,
fuse, but it's not a fuse. But whatever it's called, I don't know. I can't name it right now. But if that was gone, which they claim they found it on the lawn, the light, it wouldn't even shine. It would be dark. They would have no luminescence whatsoever. It would be black.
Yeah.
And
So that seems weird.
Yeah, and then the hero of that whole portion of what they're claiming is the Dighton police officer. Because what happened is, after this all happened and they went to the hospital, she ends up driving her car to her parents' house that live in Dighton, which is a town away. And they have to then confiscate her car and pick up her car. So the Canton police call the local Dighton police, because evidently if there's evidence in their jurisdiction or their town or whatever, they have to have assistance from them to pick it up. So,
But it is a common courtesy to call that agency to say, hey, we're going to send officers or agents into your jurisdiction to collect a vehicle. So they typically go with
right.
while you collect that evidence, because you are out of your jurisdiction. You're in another jurisdiction.
Yeah. So this Dighton police officer takes note of what the taillight looked like when they picked it up. And he says, yeah, there was a piece broken about the size of a playing card, maybe a dollar bill, maybe a little bit more narrow, but that's it. That was all that was missing. One little piece, kind of off to the side.
Yeah.
So he was kind of the hero and proving like, no, that light was not completely busted out.
And when you say that, the size of a playing card or a dollar bill, that would be consistent with the Ring video when they blew it up, and then you can kind of see some white light. So, okay, so there's a little portion missing. But that little portion probably got busted out when she backed into John's vehicle that was parked in the driveway.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, anyways, what happens next?
Okay, so after this whole interview, so basically the lead investigator, we didn't mention him at all. His name is Michael Proctor, who has to be about the worst investigator on the planet. Yeah, I guess we did talk about his text messages and all that, but when he takes the vehicle into the Sallyport, that's where the other shady activity is because he's in that Sallyport with the vehicle for a long time, plus a couple others that are mentioned throughout the trial. And then miraculously, the video footage from the Sallyport goes missing.
There was a lot of video that went missing.
Mm-hmm. Lo and behold, there was some still pictures that were submitted into evidence that they were trying to prove that when these officers were examining the vehicle and either dusting for prints or trying to collect evidence or DNA, whatever it was, from that portion of the vehicle, that they were on the opposite side in this picture. And in reality, they submitted the picture in reverse. And it wasn't, it was the defense that actually picked up on that and found that Like they purposely inverted this picture and submitted it to make it look like it was legit. And the defense actually figured it out because of the wording that was on another car was backwards.
Sure.
So,
So after they really inspect the vehicle, then they go back out to the crime scene, and lo and behold, all the taillight pieces that they didn't find all day. They didn't find with the leaf blower. Now they're all there.
well, yeah. But yet they weren't all there because several pieces were found several days later. Like I think there was even up to like 18 days later there was pieces found, which is odd.
Yeah, that makes no sense. So I don't know if they didn't collect all of it, because I don't think that they collected enough of the taillight that they could reconstruct the taillight with the pieces. Like there was probably still some missing. Probably in John's driveway. I don't know. But
Well, that was another piece too that was just completely botched investigation is they put all of the pieces together in with the same bag as his clothing. And then didn't submit it into evidence or didn't like secure it anywhere. Proctor carried it in his back seat for 2 weeks.
yeah, that's pretty common practice for me to keep evidence in a patrol vehicle.
In a
Like never.
in a shopping
Yeah,
stuff bag
next to
in
my
the back
groceries.
with his wet clothing.
Yeah.
What the? Oh, jeez.
So
I
So
can't even believe people believe some of this stuff. It's so.
common practice when you collect evidence, excuse me, is you're at the scene, you collect the evidence wearing gloves and put it into real evidence bags. You secure it in your patrol unit. As soon as you're done at that scene, you're going straight back to the department. And you're removing all the evidence, and you're checking it into your evidence lockers. Now, some departments, ours didn't have one, but some departments have evidence rooms that are so large that the evidence lockers have their own, like an evidence tech or an evidence officer that you give the evidence to. He checks it in, which I think that they have, and they put it in their lockers and they label it. In our department, it was pretty small, so we just had one room, which was a vault. And if I remember right, I think we actually had lockers. We had a refrigerator in case there was blood or anything that had to be kept cool or cold. And we would lock it up, and we would take the key, and we would put the key typically in our desk or somewhere with us. But we never left evidence like in the car. We didn't leave it on the desk. We didn't just like take it into the house and have it sitting with us while we ate breakfast. Or everything they did from the beginning to the end. Like anybody that even watches a cop show, ones that I bitch about all the time and point out every little thing they're doing wrong, even somebody that just watches that show knows that you don't drive around with evidence just sitting in the back of your car and like, God damn it, picked that up a couple weeks ago. I should probably maybe carry that in now. And you certainly don't put articles of, let's say, clothing. Matter of fact, when you're collecting evidence, everything is separated out. Everything has its own bag. You certainly wouldn't mix clothing with busted up pieces of plastic or glass or anything else, because then later, when you get to court and prosecution is pointing out how little bits and shards of plastic were found in the fabric of the clothing, well, no shit. It was in the same freaking bag.
Exactly.
And they also pointed out, which I thought was kind of comical, all of the holes in John's sweatshirt that were supposedly caused from when the vehicle backed into him and tore through the clothing and into his arm where the dog bites were. Except it was later found out that, oh, wait, the medical examiner, somebody else actually cut those holes in the clothing.
Yeah.
And then the prosecuting attorney had to recant and say, whoops.
Yeah. I mean, it just stunk to high heaven. The whole thing just stunk.
The whole thing was trash.
Yeah.
I mean, let's say that Karen did it. Even if she had, they had this thing so fucked up that you couldn't find her guilty anyway.
Oh,
because
right.
everything you did was wrong. I actually can't think of a single thing they did that was right. And then, to make it even better, was the expert witnesses.
Oh, they were amazing.
They were amazing on one side.
Yeah. On one side,
So, if I was a juror...
Amazingly embarrassing for,
Yes.
for the prosecution.
So if I was a juror, so that you have two companies that do accident reconstruction. One is hired by the defense, and the other is hired by the prosecution. The prosecution hires a company called Aperture, and the defense hires a company called ARCA. However, ARCA's already been hired to do an accident reconstruction of this case. Originally hired by the feds, the FBI, the Justice Department, which is funny because they can't, during the court case, at least in front of the jury, they can't use the words Justice Department, FBI, feds. They have to call it an outside law enforcement agency. But, so each of these expert witnesses does their own analysis. And if I'm a jury and I'm watching the testimony between ARCA and you see the testimony of Aperture, you're going, what the fuck is with this company Aperture? Which I would be curious to know how much longer that company's in business, because their expert witness, at least from what I observed, was the dumbest fucker I've ever seen.
Well, you know why they're going to be in business is because people like the prosecution is going to hire them and pay them whatever amount of money they want to lie for them and come up with these obscure...
I wouldn't anymore, because
Lord.
you have one side. So you have one company that does testing where they actually will take a dummy, and they made a big deal about it hanging from a forklift. Well, you have to hold it up somehow. And they would do collision tests, and they would measure, impact. They would measure the impact and look at the damage to the vehicle. And then you have the prosecution's expert witness who paints his fucking arm blue and has somebody back into him at 2 miles an hour. And he actually leans in. You can watch it. He leans into the car and then spins himself around. And then you're looking at the paint transfer between his arm and the taillight, and they're trying to show, well, you can see based on the paint transfer from his arm that it would be consistent with the injuries. Well, the taillight didn't fucking bite him. So, and the whole thing, when you watch the video, you're watching it like, what the fuck? Did they just find this guy on the street and say, hey, I need you to do an experiment? And this guy is like, fucking hey, man, I've watched Nickelodeon.
It's almost like it's satire. During the trial, I was
definitely.
like, is this for real?
Yeah,
this has got to be a joke. This is satire, right?
They could put that shit on Saturday Night Live, and they wouldn't even have to hire an actor. They would just say, fuck it, let's just play the shit from the trial.
Oh, Lord. And mind you, the prosecution paid them $450,000?
Yeah.
$450,000.
Yeah. So if there's anybody from, wow.
And ARCA got paid $50,000.
Yeah, $50,000. And there was a huge, just the difference in those two, and that of all the expert witnesses that I watched, those were the two that there was such a contrasting difference between the techniques that they used to try and recreate the accident. It was unbelievable. Like, I couldn't believe what I was watching when Aperture was testifying. And there was like, I think I saw 2 witnesses from Aperture, and both of them, I just thought, I wouldn't hire these fuckers to mow my lawn.
Well, and the first guy that did the data part of it, where he was trying to extract the data from the supposed black box or whatever it was from her vehicle, that's where they were getting all of the acceleration and the trigger points and yada yada. That guy was totally uncredible because he lied about his degree. He lied about where he went to school.
The guy's
he lied about his degree, and you're thinking, this guy is claiming he's got a bachelor's degree from a university, and the guy didn't even freaking graduate.
No, but he's been working on it for 17 years.
You know, I'm thinking, oh, come on. So he's lying on his resumes about what he actually, and that irks me, because as a person with a college degree, with a bachelor's degree, somebody proclaims that they are something they're not, pisses me off.
Well, it's like it'd be no different than like the stolen valor cases where people claim to be ex-military.
Exactly.
Or people that claim to be ex-law enforcement officers, and then you find out they're just full of shit. It's like the guy that says, I was in the military, then you find out that he talked to a recruiter once, and he almost made it to basic training, but he twisted his ankle, and now he's medically disqualified.
Yeah. Well, we hear it a lot in nursing, too. It's like, oh, I'm a nurse. Really? You are? Oh, well, I took care of my aunt when she was sick in her home.
I'm a CNA.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, oh, come on.
Same difference.
You know, it does kind of get under your skin a little bit.
It's like what was the class we used to have in Howard County, the Law Enforcement Explorers. It would be about like somebody that was in Law Enforcement Explorers saying, well,
I'm a cop.
I was a cop once.
Yeah.
Bad.
Real
Yeah,
bad.
that guy was pretty funny.
Well, so what sealed the deal to me, though, is the medical experts. The two physicians, the one that was in pathology, and the other gal that was a medical expert, and she had her expertise in dog bites. Actually, they both had expertise in dog bites. Both of these experts said he didn't get hit by a car. I mean, and they stood on business, all 10 toes down. He did not get hit by a car.
Oh yeah, just came right out and said it.
I mean, those women did not flinch when they said it.
No, one of them was actually kind of funny to watch, because I think that she was kind of being picked on a little bit by the prosecution, maybe discredited. And she had been, was she the forensic pathologist?
The forensic pathologist, yeah.
Yeah, she's only been practicing since 1981, so she's got a couple of years under her belt. And she's testified as an expert witness in other cases, and she's worked with thousands of deceased bodies. And I think she kind of had enough, because I think it was day 2, and it started off right in the morning, when the prosecution says, "Good afternoon." And she fires right back that it's like, well, it's 11:50.
Yeah, that was funny. It's 10 till. Like, it was epic when she said that. I'm like, oh, we're starting the day off like this.
Well,
Let's go.
Maybe she did that because they were maybe nitpicking some things that were just, probably didn't even matter that she said. And then he says good afternoon when it's not afternoon, even though it was close. And she's like, well, if you're going to nitpick me, well, fuck you. It's not afternoon.
Turns out that I think why they had this animosity towards each other was he actually hired her or used her in a case. And she actually you know, she's a medical expert. She is saying what she sees, and it didn't go his way in that previous case. And ever since then, he hated her. And they did not get along. And so it's funny because it's like, oh, okay, you know, it doesn't matter what side hires her. She's going to say what's the truth. So
I kind of feel bad for Hank Brennan.
I don't.
The reason I feel bad for this guy is, one, he's not the district attorney. He was hired by the district attorney's office to prosecute the case. So really he's only doing what he's hired to do, but he was so outmatched by the defense team. He didn't have a clue. He had to know, or he didn't have a chance. He had to know that he didn't have a chance. And it probably didn't take long, especially when the expert witnesses took the stand. He knew he was toast. He had to know he was toast. And so in a way, I kind of felt bad because I thought, this guy is just getting his ass kicked every day in court for weeks. And he had, I guarantee there was no day that he went home and said, well, hon, it went good today.
Well, but he was so arrogant. And then to pull the shit he pulled with the sweatshirt, you know, that kind of thing. That to me, I was like, no, okay, I don't have any sympathy for this guy because he's outright lying and trying to pull the wool over eyes. And at some point, or would you just freaking roll over and take it? And it's like, come on. Like, why now he's got to pull out lies, like flat out blatant lies.
Well, imagine how it would feel being. Now, I don't know Hank Brennan's past. I don't know.
You
anything.
don't?
No, I really don't.
He defended Whitey Bulger,
Oh, Hank Brennan. Okay. So I guess I did know that.
the mobster.
But imagine what it's like.
I mean, he's a defense attorney. He's not a prosecutor.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the disconnect is because he is used to being a defense attorney.
But imagine being Hank Brennan, and you're on the prosecution, and you look over at the defense, and you see the defense is stacked. Like their attorneys are the best of the best. And so he probably felt like he had to puff his chest out a little bit, but he had to know that he was getting his ass kicked every day. And I don't know, I would almost hate to be that guy because who the fuck's going to hire you now? Like, you just as well just stick to DUIs and shit. Like,
Yeah.
if I was going to be a defendant in a high-profile anything case, I'm not going to say, I watched Hank Brennan in that Karen Reed trial. I think I'm going to hire that guy.
I know, and it's so out there now that, I mean, everybody, well, I say that, but really still nobody knows about the trial. So, but so many people have eyes on this case.
Oh, yeah.
And it's gone. And now that there's a verdict, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see all these clips of him and.
What? There was something else in this case too. Well, there was a conduct also of the judge.
Oh yeah.
So I don't, I'm ex-law enforcement. I know I've mentioned that once or 1,000 times, but I don't go around really bashing judges too much because, fuck, I might end up in front of one of them. But she was awful. So maybe they do things different out east, but just her demeanor and kind of how she acted towards the defense versus the prosecution.
Yeah, she clearly showed bias, but
It seemed to me, and the weird thing is, if you watch a court case, typically when somebody objects, they're allowed to give the reason for the objection. But for whatever reason, she doesn't allow that in her courtroom, which I thought was strange. Like normally if somebody's going to object to whatever line of questioning that the other attorney has, they state the reason for the objection, and there wasn't. So if you're just watching the case, like myself or anybody else, you're probably wondering, what the fuck was the reason for the objection?
yeah.
And it was constant. Like, they objected all the time, and most of the time, when the prosecution objected, I wish I had a tally sheet.
Oh, there
She
was,
would
people did take tally sheets of it.
It seemed like they were typically sustained.
Mm-hmm.
And the defense, when they would object, and they had some that were sustained, but a lot of times she would say, no, I'll let them answer that.
Right.
And when you don't know the reason for the objection, that makes it even worse. You're like, why? What's the grounds for the objection? I don't. And I don't know. Maybe she figures that a dummy like me wouldn't understand anyway, because I'm not a lawyer.
Well, the story is that this is typical for this area.
Well, it is East.
So there apparently is a lot of corruption in this area, which is why the FBI was involved in the first place.
Sure. And it's not the first time the FBI has been involved with looking into a case that involves
In the same area.
the Canton Police Department.
Correct.
That might be another case we'll have to talk about.
I think we are definitely going to have to talk about it because it kind of ties together and why the FBI is originally involved because of what happened to Sandra Birchmore. So we'll talk about her another time, but I think that's ultimately why the FBI led them to this case is because you could blatantly see that there was a mishandlement of the investigation,
it's trash.
If not corruption. And
yeah, I think it seemed to me a clear case of
and it's going up to the DA's office, to Michael Morrissey. He's the DA, so it's coming from him.
There seems to be a brotherhood issue out there, and if anybody's not familiar with that term, in law enforcement, when they talk about the brotherhood, it's police officers looking out for other police officers, to the point where if one police officer sees another police officer doing something bad, wrong, or illegal, they might, on some level, scold the officer. But if it comes down to the officer getting in trouble, they're going to have that officer's back, and they're going to cover up and do everything they can to keep that cop from getting into trouble.
Yeah.
And I've personally had experience with that, with law enforcement officers from out east. I've been scolded by law enforcement officers from out east when I talked about even citing another cop. They couldn't believe it. Like, you would do that this is what they said. You would do that to a brother in law enforcement? It's like, well, he's breaking the fucking law. Why wouldn't I? I'd do it to anybody else. He should know better. He should know better more than anybody else.
Well, I think that's where society looked at this case and immediately assumed she was guilty because these are cops. He was a cop. The other people involved are cops. So you automatically have this perception that cops aren't going to do anything wrong. Why would they lie?
But it also reinforced the people that already looked at law enforcement in a bad light and think, all cops are corrupt. Well, this case didn't help that cause at all.
Right.
So you do have good cops out there that don't fall for the whole brotherhood bullshit. But because they're wearing a uniform, people are going to look at him and say, that's probably another corrupt cop.
Yeah. Well, and in the backstory, too, is allegedly this Brian Alberts, whose home that they were at, he's had run-ins with these types of situations before where he's gotten into a fight with another officer. He's hit a fireman over the head with a liquor bottle. He gets into lots of altercations and is never reprimanded. Yeah, their bad behavior is, and also there's a big family within law enforcement. They have a lot of extended family, in-laws. They kind of run the town, so to speak.
Well, I think
they run some businesses.
Aren't they related to the governor?
I don't know. I don't know.
I think I heard.
What was his name? The Alberts?
Yeah,
Albert.
That they had family members in politics, and maybe I'm wrong, but I was thinking that it went all the way up to the governor's office.
Brian Albert.
Marissa's doing some research.
So, okay, so we never really talked about what we think happened to John.
Yeah, we can talk about that. And of course, all that's going to be
Alleged.
but it'd be fitting. So we can probably back up a little bit to why Karen might not have felt real comfortable going into that house because of another individual that was in that house.
Right.
Brian Higgins.
Brian Higgins.
So, according to text messages, there was some, and this isn't good for Karen to read, but so there was some texting back and forth between her and Brian Higgins. And I guess I would say they were flirtatious, even though that some of them that testified said they didn't believe so. But a lot of back and forth about, they seemed to me, it sounded like hookup type texting. Like,
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm going to explain this as a woman. She's feeling used by her boyfriend. She's not feeling supported. She's not getting what she needs out of the relationship. She's not respected. She's not really, she's not getting out what she wanted. She's feeling used. They're already in these discussions. Well, do we keep the relationship going? Do we not? He's already supposedly cheated on her. So she's dealing with that. And I just really think that he probably just takes advantage of her, so to speak. Not necessarily friends with benefits, but, some type of situation like that where he likes her to be around when he wants her to be around, when it's convenient for him. And otherwise, then he's probably like, not doing too much for her. So she's sick of it, and she's fishing. She's fishing around, and she gets a hold of Brian Higgins is in this friend group. And so she's like,
well, he's giving her some attention.
Okay, Brian, what's up with you? So she's fishing. She gets his number from another friend. She starts texting him, and he's kind of suspicious at first in these text messages. Like, why are you texting me? Like, he's obviously like, why is this hot girl texting me? And he's suspicious, and she's like, oh, well, I think you're kind of cute, and I think we've got a lot in common, and yada yada. And they just kind of have these friend conversations back and forth. Well, then it kind of escalates a little bit via text, and I think you're hot, yada yada. And then they eventually do meet up. After they meet up, she ghosts him. So I can speculate what happened.
Well, yeah, so they go to the bar that night, and she's there with John. And while she's there with John, she gets a text from Brian Higgins. And it just says, well.
Yeah. Yeah,
well.
So they've been texting back and forth. And I think initially, as they're texting back and forth, this is going on for, I don't know how long, several weeks or whatever, this texting back and forth. And in one case, he comes to the door of her house, I think, of John's house. He comes to the door to maybe pick something up or something, I don't know. And she leans in and just gives him a peck. Just kind of gives him a peck goodbye, and just kind of this little friendly, flirtatious thing. And I think he kind of got caught off guard and was like, oh, man, she kind of does dig me. And so then the flirtatious texting continues. And then, like I said, they finally end up meeting up. And he's like, hey, you want to come to my place later on? And she's like, okay. They meet up. And then, like I said, after that meetup, she ghosts him. Well, I fully think that they slept together. And she was like, kind of instantly regretting that decision.
Sure.
And so then she doesn't reach out to him ever again. And I think it completely bruised his ego. you know, here initially he's questioning, why would this good looking girl be interested in me? And then she's kind of reciprocating and she's given into him, and then they end up hooking up. And I think like his ego was completely blown. He was embarrassed, and it kind of pissed him off.
Well, I think he's pissed off. I think he's pissed off
And
because
so I think that's the freaking motive behind the whole scene that happened at the bar that night is, you know, you add alcohol to it. She actually comes into the bar and completely ignores him.
oh yeah, and now he's pissed because
And not only ignores him, but she's with her boyfriend.
Yeah.
And they're showing affection to each other. Oh, Lord. He was pissed off.
so, and that's that scene in the video, because you can see him kind of motion over in John's direction, and another person at the bar with him actually grabs a hold of him, almost like he's holding him back.
Mm-hmm.
But he continues to motion and then does a motion like, you know, let's go outside.
Yeah.
So, and for me, this is a little bit weird because do they know when they're getting ready to go to Brian's house that he's going to be there too? I mean, they do.
I think so, yeah.
Because
I think they
now
do.
he sends John O'Keefe a text.
Yeah, and says, you coming here?
You come in here.
Yeah.
So now we're going to get into what we think happened. We're not the only ones that think this. So this is all
Well, and
speculation, but
okay, we have to add another piece to the Cliff
Oh.
Notes, though. Okay, so what happened prior to everybody going to their house after the bar was earlier in the night, the son was having a birthday party. And so the son had a bunch of his friends over. And one of those also included his cousin, Colin Albert. So mind you, all of these younger kids, and I'm talking like early 20s, except for Colin, I think he's either senior in high school or he's in college. I don't know, whatever. I don't know. He's early 20s probably, let's just say that. But they're all at the house partying and having this birthday party before everybody gets there. So we have to kind of add them to the mix too, because there is speculation that Colin is there. And why Colin is important is because Colin is allegedly the town drug dealer.
that I wasn't aware of.
And John O'Keefe has found out this information, and he's been investigating. And he's been on Colin's tail about the drug dealing. And supposedly, allegedly, there are transactions going on in the D&E Pizza, which is the brothers' pizza place. And so that's kind of where this all lies. And, you know, John is one of the good cops. He's been investigating this, and he's on Colin Albert's tail with these drug deals. So there's a lot of underlying stuff going on in the house before John gets there.
So we speculate that they leave the bar. Obviously, just looking at the video, there's some tension, if nothing else, between Higgins, who's pissed off because John is with his, girl.
Mm-hmm.
So he's pissed off about that. I mean, that seems obvious in the video. Then, of course, maybe what you brought up as well. So they go to this party, and John gets dropped off. He's going to go inside and see if it's okay if they come in. And so he gets out of the vehicle, goes into the house. And then Karen, who's still out in the vehicle waiting to hear, all of a sudden doesn't hear. And she's texting him, what's going on, where you at, are we welcome? And he ain't saying shit back. So that's where we discussed earlier, where she gets pissed off And she leaves. So we speculate that John probably goes into the house. And now you have a house full of drunk people and one, maybe two, that have a problem with John. One who really has a problem with John that night already.
Right.
Who's boozed up. And these are big boys, too.
Oh, yeah.
Big boys. And so we speculate that John gets rolled. There's probably a confrontation. John probably doesn't have many friends in that house.
Right.
And they start whipping his ass. Now, where the dog comes in, and I would know this, and I think anybody that's familiar with dogs at all, if you have a German Shepherd, and this particular German Shepherd isn't known to, like, be good with people.
Yeah, and is not police trained. Like, that's the one
Not
thing that they
police
brought
trained.
up is he was not, it's not a trained
this
dog.
is just the family pet, German Shepherd. Doesn't really like strangers anyway, or doesn't like people. But they're pretty loyal to their owners. So anybody familiar with dogs knows if you have a dog that's pretty aggressive towards people that it really doesn't know, and there's an altercation between its owner or a handler and another person, the dogs jump in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And-
because they're protecting their owner.
Yeah, they're protecting their owner. So we think that John was probably getting his ass kicked or in some sort of a fight with whoever within that house. And the dog gets in, of course, grabs his arm, bites him. That's where the bite marks come from. And whether or not he gets killed in the house or outside, of course, we don't know. But there's some changes in the house other than the dog being, coming up missing. They get rid of the dog, like, immediately.
They rehome the dog.
They rehome the dog.
Supposedly, even though
Supposedly.
we don't know,
Don't know
where the
where.
dog is.
But they also make some renovations to the house, and they ultimately sell the house. Because don't they tear out the carpet in the basement all of a sudden? The basement comes into play.
Yeah, which supposedly they had just redone that flooring. And then they decided to do it again.
Probably a flood of some type, maybe a flood of John's
Bodily
blood and
fluid.
DNA.
And this is coming from, a lot of this is hearsay stuff, but you follow the rumors and the stuff online. But, it's coming from information from the actual carpet layer who actually laid the carpet and things like that. But the other rumor is that Colin, who I mentioned before, ends up, they all kind of tell on themselves in one way or another. So apparently he's out the next weekend or a few days later and he's bragging about it. He's also got an injured right hand, bloody knuckles, which in the first trial, his excuse for having these bloody swollen knuckles is he slipped on the ice and he landed on his knuckles. And that's how his knuckles got bloody. The other thing is Brian Albert had a black eye and he had his arm in a sling. And makes you wonder if that's maybe a reason he didn't come out that morning to see anybody to help John, is because he
Looked like he got his ass kicked.
was also in an altercation. The other thing that was really interesting is you see footage of, and this was on the actual documentary, that Body in the Snow documentary, his procession, his funeral procession with hundreds of police officers attending his funeral. But guess which cop didn't attend?
Was it Mr. Was it
Brian Alberts
That's weird.
did not attend his funeral. Why? I suppose because he had a black fucking eye. And it's all of that stuff is just like, come on. Let's put the pieces together here and use some common sense.
And then you also have the forensic pathologist that talks about the injuries to John. Probably more consistent with a fight than getting hit by a car.
Right.
She couldn't say that it was from a fight, but it would definitely be more consistent with injuries you would get from a fight, like your cut on your eye.
Yeah. And she described the laceration in the back of his head and like in detail and how it would happen. And she said he had to have fallen back. He fell back on something with a ledge and something that was granular because it left little striations
Sure.
in his skin. I mean, she described it to a T. So it's like, okay, well, he got clocked and he fell back on a step, or he fell back on a fireplace, or whatever. I don't know, but he fell back. I mean, was it intentional? Probably not. It probably was not an intentional murder.
I don't think they.
I think it was accidental, but
meant to kill him. But the simple fact is, they did. They did it in another cop's house. They did it in a house that really, the way I look at it, these guys are almost like mob.
yeah, I was going to say the same
Like
thing. They act like
mafia.
the mafia.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we think.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention, the text message that was rolling around that came from somebody that says, hey, yeah, and this is how the actual defense got this information, is because Karen hired a private investigator, or somebody on her side hired a private investigator. The private investigator actually found out heard the information of what actually happened in the house. That private investigator took it to the defense and said, just so you know, you need to look into this person, and this person, because they're claiming that they got into a fight. He fell back, hit his head. He went unconscious. He was laying there unconscious for a while. Then a few hours later, he starts convulsing. And they waited till about 3 or 4 in the morning, and they dumped him outside in the yard. That's what they're admitting to. That's what the private investigator found out, just from what was being said around town.
And even if, so let's say that happened in the house and they called law enforcement and said, hey, it was an accident. The fact that there was an altercation and he died as a result of the altercation would be a manslaughter charge. And at the least. And all of their careers would have been over.
Mm-hmm.
All of them. So that would be motive enough right there to say, oh, shit.
Yeah, we gotta find a solution quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Throw them out in the yard. At that time, they probably didn't even have a plan other than, I don't know why this guy
Actually,
was dead.
yes, I feel like they did.
You think they did?
Yeah, because we go back to the snowplow driver, who was also a very excellent witness for the defense, who says, hey, I plowed at 2 o'clock in the morning and there was no body. He made a couple passes, there was no body in the yard. He was very aware. And then the contracted snowplow driver, this other company that the town contracts with, actually ended up hearing I don't know, what do you call it? Something go over the scanner. That said, it was about 4 in the morning. Heard this go over the scanner, over the Department of Roads scanner, and said, hey, there's been a report of a pedestrian getting hit by a plow.
So you think maybe originally they were going to blame a plow driver?
Yep.
Until Karen did the whole...
There's a retired officer by the name of, I think his name is Peter Murphy, and he talks about this because he was a Canton police officer, retired, and he himself says that he talked to the contracted snowplow company, and they heard that go over about 4 in the morning and said, hey, there's been a report of a pedestrian hit by a plow, and then nothing was heard of it. And when one of the workers from that contracted company asked about it, the head of the Department of Roads said, don't ever mention that again. If you mention that again, you're fired.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me, because when you look at or you watch the case and all of the individuals involved, whether it's the the local law enforcement, your federal agents that work with the local law enforcement in that area, some of the politicians, the corruption appears to be pretty deep and pretty widespread. So it's hard telling. We'll never know how bad it is. When the FBI is out there investigating the same department more than once, I mean, there's a problem. And I don't know how, I guess I don't know how.
I don't think the FBI's done. You know, the FBI came back and arrested a Stoughton police officer for the murder of Sandra Birchmore. And that just recently happened a few months ago. So I don't think it's over with the FBI. I think they're still investigating this one.
Yeah, because that was an investigation done by the Canton Police Department where they said, or they ruled that it was suicide, and it turns out that another police officer killed her.
Yeah.
Yep.
We will see.
What do you think the civil lawsuit's going to bring?
Oh, there's a civil lawsuit you're talking about?
Do they have a leg to stand on? They found her not guilty. I just don't.
Against his family filed one against Karen. But the judge said it couldn't be moved forward until the criminal case was resolved.
Well, you can, because so a civil.
How are they going to prove?
I don't know how they're going to prove it. Well, see, the burden of proof is different between a civil case and a criminal case. So there's a criminal case where you have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. When you get to a civil case, I believe it's called a preponderance of the evidence. So it's the difference between you've got to be pretty fucking sure that that person did it. Like, is there any other thing that could have happened that would give you a reason, something that's reasonable that could give you doubt? It has to be reasonable, which could be anything. So in order to be found guilty, there can be there is no other reasonable doubt. I can't think of any other way this would have happened other than this way, and they're guilty. So a preponderance of the evidence would be more likely than not. So you would basically be like having three scenarios and looking at all of them and saying, well, what would be the most likely? Like, any of these could have happened, but what just seems to be the most likely? And if that seems to the jury or whoever, the judge, that, it could be more likely than something else. Because if you look at O.J. Simpson,
Right.
found not guilty, successfully sued by the families, because the burden of proof is much less in a civil case.
Which begs the question is, where is this going to take place? Who's going to be the judge? Is she going to have the same defense team?
I doubt it. I don't think they'll have the same judge. I don't even know if it'll be in the same courtroom.
Oh, praise the Lord.
But what are they gonna get out of her? I mean, you're squeezing blood from a turnip. Even with O.J. Simpson, by the time that they got to him, I mean, they were taking things like his Heisman Trophy, and of course, I personally believe he's guilty of what he did anyway. But regardless, I mean, they couldn't get a whole lot out of him, and there's even less to get out of Karen Reed. She's not a celebrity now. What they might do, and I don't know, I think this is possible. So she's may get a book deal.
Yeah.
She's probably going to get paid for some interviews, and so they could lay claim to any revenue.
Take the royalties from that or whatever.
So that could happen.
It's against her and the two bars that overserved is what they're claiming.
Yeah. Every bar overserves. Never been to one that doesn't.
Which, yeah, okay, so she's found guilty of driving under the influence, but then can she come back in the civil case and say, hey, you took that test, you took my blood at 6 o'clock in the morning?
I don't know that she's going to have any civil case. And if I was her, and what I would guess she's going to do, she's going to try and move on. And she's probably going to, it's going to be tough for her to probably find employment. So I think that she'll probably take any sort of a deal she's going to be offered. I mean, I probably would. And I feel, the worst part of this whole deal is you still have somebody who's dead, who didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
And whoever is ultimately responsible is probably never going to be brought to justice. Probably. They might. We'll see how this federal investigation rolls out, but it's going to be tough. Could be interesting.
Yeah.
What kind of time we got?
1 hour, 41 minutes.
Oh,
Holy moly.
what do you think?
Yeah.
Should we wrap it up?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So,
to be continued with Canton,
Yeah.
Massachusetts.
oh yeah, there'll be more.
Yeah.
So, well,
All right. Have a good night.
good night.
Bye.
Later.
Don't talk back unless you wanna talk